Hello everybody, my name is Ismail Juma Mbogo. I'm a teacher from Educare TZ. Welcome in physics periods. Today we are going to discussing a little bit about the frictions on the concept of frictions part B. From here we are going to discussing about the methods of increasing frictions. So the frictions, as the previous lesson we say, is the force of attractions which resist the body motions. So the motion of the body is always being resisted to move. This is happening due to the frictions. So today we are going to look about the method of increasing frictions. So how can we do, or how can we do so as to increase the frictions? So the method of increasing the frictions, the following are the method of increasing the frictions. The first one, increase the normal force by increasing the weight of the body. In order for us to increase the frictional force, we are required to increase the normal force. So ili sisi tuweze kuongeza frictional force, tunahitajika sisi tuweze kuongeza the increase of weight of the body. You can see here, this one is the normal force. So if we need to increase the frictional force, we need to increase the normal force, or we need to increase the weight of the body. So the body, once the weight of the body increases, we are sure that the normal force also increases. So after increasing the normal force, we are sure that we are increasing the friction. Another thing is the changing or increase roughness of the surface. Changing or increase the roughness of the surface. So hapa tunaangalia namna gani ambavyo tunaweza tukaongeza the friction force. So tunapokuwa tunabadilisha au tunaongeza roughness of the surface, yani surface inakuwa haipo smooth, inakuwa ipo rough. So surface ikiwa rough, maana yake tuna increase the frictions. As the previous lesson we says, the roughness of the surface increases the frictions. Once we're looking on how the frictions are formed due to the mechanical bonds, the surface, once it's being rough, it means that we are tending to increase the frictions. And once the surface is being soft, we are tending to decreasing the frictions. Another method of increasing friction was the use of material of high coefficiency. Once we're using the material of high coefficients, example, rubber bands, the material which have high coefficients, tuna maana kwamba tunatumia yale material ambaye coefficients of friction yake inakuwa ni kubwa, kwamba kiwango cha friction yake kinakuwa ni kikubwa. Kwa hiyo tutakapokuwa tumetumia yale material ambayo kiwango cha friction yake ni kikubwa, hiyo material yanatusaidia sisi kuongeza friction. Mfano wa hayo material ni rubber bands. There is a method of decreasing friction. What are the methods of decreasing frictions? We see that the methods of decreasing friction, the first one was placing a rollers between the rough surface. If you have two rough surfaces, once you introduce at the middles the roller, the friction force is tend to decreasing. So tutakapokuwa tuna friction force yetu ya surface mbili, tutakapoamua kuintroduce roller katikati ya hizo rough surface mbili, maana yake tuna tend to increase au tuna tend to decrease the frictional force. Another thing was the using of ball bearings. So sometimes kwa mfano kwenye wale magorofa, wajengaji wa magorofa, wanapokuwa wanajenga magorofa huwa wanatumia zile ball bearings. Wanaweka bearing katikati. Kwa lengo gani? Kwa lengo la ku-experience au ku-exhibit the friction force. So tunatumia friction force hapa kupunguza ile friction force kwa kuweka balls. Tunasema ball bearings. Kwamba ni kama mipira midogo ya chuma, huwa tunaitengeneza, tunaiweka pale wakati wanapojenga magorofa yetu, ili wakati frictions inapotokea isiweze kuathiri zaidi. Kwa hiyo hii pia ni method ambayo inatumika kwa ajili ya ku decrease frictions. Another one was the use of lubrications. Tunatumia matumizi ya vilainishi. What are those lubrications? Example, oil. Once we use oil, we tend to decrease frictions. That's why tunaona kwamba kwenye magari yetu sometimes after few days tuna introduce a new oil. After few days tuna introduce new oil. What are the purpose of introducing those oil on our cars? Is to reduce the frictions. Or sometimes we can use water. What are the purpose of using water in our machinery parts? We're using water in our machinery parts so as to decrease the frictions. Another ways of reducing frictions were the speed materials, which have low coefficients of frictions and thus slide easily. So we have something is what we call a speed material. The speed material which have low coefficients, we need to reduce the frictions. We are requiring to use the material which have low coefficients of frictions. So what are those material? We need to use those material of coefficient of friction. That's slide easy. For instance, we can use a plastic one. The plastic materials are the ones of the material which have low coefficients of frictions, and that's easy to reduce the frictions. The fifth one's methods of decreasing frictions was use or make the surface soft. If we are required to reduce the frictions, we are demands to use the surface soft. So pale ambapo utakapokuwa unaona kwamba kuna uhitaji wa kupunguza friction, basi utahakikisha kwamba ile surface iko pale inakuwa iko soft zaidi. Sasa kwenye concept nzima ya frictions kuna vitu ambavyo inabidi tuviangalie. Cha kwanza tuna kitu kinaitwa normal force and cha pili tunaita limiting frictions. So normal force, what is a normal force and what is a limiting frictions? Normal force, we can say, is equal and opposite to the weight of the body. So normal force, hii ni ile force ambayo tunasema kwamba yenyewe is equal, ni sawasawa, and opposite, na ni opposite, yani iko tofauti to the weight of the body. Kwamba normal force pamoja na weight of the body, hivi vitu ni sawasawa. So normal force, this one, normal force, and the weight of the body, na hii weight of the body, hivi vitu viwili ni vitu sawasawa. Lakini tofauti yake ni kwamba normal force ina act katika opposite direction to the weight of the body. Kwamba ikitokea weight of the body ikiwa inaelekea chini, maana yake normal force inaelekea juu. Lakini weight yake tunapozungumzia ambayo ina measured in newtons, kati ya R ambayo ni normal force and the weight of the body zinakuwa ni sawasawa. So always normal force is perpendicular to the surface on which it rests. So mara zote tunasema kwamba hii normal force inakuwa ipo perpendicular na surface on which it rests. Kwamba inakuwa ni sawasawa na ile surface ambapo inapokuwa imefanyaje? Imetulia. So what are the definitions of limiting frictions? We can define that limiting frictions is the minimum force required to move a body over one another. So ile limiting frictions, yani kwamba kile kiwango kidogo cha force ambacho kinahitajika kumove a body ili kitu kiweze kumove kutoka sehemu moja kwenda sehemu nyingine, ile tunaita ni limiting frictions. So limiting friction is the minimum force, the few force required to move a body over one another. So once tunapokuwa na kitu chetu tumekiweka kwenye meza, baada ya kukiweka kwenye meza tunahitaji nguvu kidogo tu kuweza kuadjust kile kitu kiweze kumove kutoka sehemu kiliyopo kwenda sehemu nyingine. So ile minimum force ambayo tunaitumika kuadjust ile body, hiyo tunaiita ni limiting friction. Is the minimum force required to move a body over one another. Note, from the above diagram, this one, from these diagrams, we get some concepts. The first one, from the above diagrams, R, which is normal reaction, is equal to mg. which what is mg? M is a mass and g is a gravitational constant. So normal reactions, or R, is the same, is equal to the weight of the body. So normal reaction is equal to the weight of or equal to the weight of the body. Don't confuse. If someone asks what is the weight of the body, we can say is comparable to the normal reaction, or it is the same to the normal reaction. Then the second note, when a body is at the rest, frictional force is equal to force. So once we look here, once the body is at the rest, here the body is at the rest. So this body, once it is at the rest, the frictional force of that body is equal to the force applied. So the F frictional force is equal to force of the body applied when the body is at the rest on the table. Another things, when a body at motion, friction force is not equal to the F. So we have to find the net force. Sometimes when the body starts to move, the frictional force is not equal to the force applied. So we need to calculate the net force. When the body starts to move, static frictional force is equal to the limiting frictions. Wakati ambapo kitu kitakapotaka kuanza kutembea, once the body starts to move, static friction force, ile static friction force yetu is equal to the limiting friction, kwamba ni sawasawa na ile limiting frictions. So minimum force applied tend to start a motion. So kiwango kidogo cha force ambacho tunaita limiting frictions kita tend to start the motion, kitaamua sasa kwamba sisi au hichi kitu kina move. Wakati ambapo kitu kinataka kuanza kumove, static frictional force inakuwa ni sawasawa na ile limiting friction. So ikiwa static frictional force ni sawasawa na limiting friction, maana yake the body tend to start to move. Another note, when a body starts to move, kinetic friction force is not equal to the minimum force applied, it tend to start motions. So when a body starts to move, wakati ambapo kile kitu sasa kinataka kuanza kumove, kinetic frictions force is not equal to the minimum force. So the kinetic friction force haiwezi ikawa sawasawa to the limiting frictional force or minimum force applied tend to start motions. So things to understand here is these two notes. When a body starts to move, wakati ambapo kitu kinaanza kumove, static frictional force is equal to the limiting frictional force, kwamba ni sawasawa na limiting frictional force. Na badala yake, when a body starts to move, kinetic frictional force, ile kinetic frictional force is not equal, haiko sawasawa to the minimum force applied tend to start motion, haipo sawasawa to the limiting frictional force au minimum force ambayo inahitajika kile kitu kiweze kumove. Another things is, if limiting frictions less than the force applied, the body move. Ikiwa limiting friction ni ndogo kuliko ile force itakayokuwa applyiwa, the body move, kile kitu kitafanyaje? Kita move. Na badala yake, ikiwa ile limiting friction ni kubwa than the force applied, the body cannot move. So the limiting friction ikiwa ni ndogo kuliko ile force ambayo imeapplyiwa ya kile kitu ili kiweze kumove, basi ni kwamba ile that body can move. And once the limiting friction is greater than the force applied, the body cannot move. So after being discussing about the concept of normal reactions, limiting frictions, method of decreasing and method of increasing frictions, my lovely dear students, let us looking about the task. So our task today is first to explain the 3 methods of increasing frictions and 4 methods of decreasing frictions. Thereafter, we are going to discuss, or we are going to start define the term limiting frictions and normal reaction. So I wish you all the best, my lovely students. Stay tuned on Educare TZ for the next period.